Hi, friends and families of Sunny Days Therapy. Thank you for virtually joining us today. Most of us are experiencing or maybe expecting some kind of a transition coming up with fall right around the corner and school starting. We recognize that everybody's transitions look differently. Some might be starting virtually for school, or maybe at home, or a hybrid model, or all in person. So today we're here to talk about how to successfully navigate these transitions and how to navigate emotions that come along with that. So now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Ashley Smith. She is joining us from Vanda Counseling to help talk about some of these strategies that will help to increase success. Ashley, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so great to be having this conversation today because I think this topic of transitions is going to be a topic that so many of our parents and families and so many of our schools are going to be having just throughout the school year. So I think this is really important. And yeah, a little bit about me is I am a therapist here at the Rogers office with Vanda, and we also have offices in Melrose and Golden Valley. And I work with kids and families, kids of all ages, so kids and teens, and then also some adults. So that's kind of my focus area and background.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing and for joining us. We can't thank you enough. Um, and as we know, these transitions look different for everyone. So diving into this topic, can you tell us a little bit about what expected transitions into the fall or school year might look like?
Yeah, so it can be really hard, I think, for parents to know what's typical and what's not typical for kids. And I think the three things to pay attention to as far as transitions go is the duration, the intensity, and then like how long it takes your kiddo to calm down or soothe. And so some typical transitions, like let's say you're getting ready to take your kids to school and they're like eating breakfast and they need to get dressed and brush their teeth and all that stuff. And so you might see typical things like whining or stalling or procrastinating, right? Like as parents, that can be kind of annoying. But then like as long as kiddo is like still getting in the car and still going to school, and maybe he or she needs like a little bit of extra time once they get to school to calm down. I think as long as we're seeing that, that's more of the typical transition. And those are the things we kind of see at the start of every school year, just like kind of adjusting to a new routine and a new schedule. I think the other thing that's important for like parents and families to pay attention to is we as adults have a hard time handling change too. So just like our kids do, we have a hard time. And I think the most important thing to keep in mind is how we respond to our kids during the transition is just as important as how we're helping them through the transition, like they learn through us. So if we're able to stay calm and stay regulated, I think our kids are just that much more likely to transition easier and be able to handle what's happening. So I think that's important to remember too, like how we model it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
change can be difficult for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So you had mentioned a little bit about age and development and temperament and how that might influence responses. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the language to use with your children that might best fit their development?
Yes. So I love this question because I think that is like one of the most common things I get asked from parents, especially when like I'm doing therapy with them and their kids, is how do I talk to my kids about this? Like especially COVID and quarantine and this pandemic is, I mean, one, this is the first time any of us has ever experienced something like this. So trying to process it as us as adults and trying to figure out how we feel about it and then also communicating that to our kids is just really challenging. So it's hard to know like what do I say or how do I say it. So I thought it would be helpful to split it up into, we have like our elementary age kids and then we have our like middle school and high school, so like our teenage age kids. And to kind of start with elementary school, I think the three things to keep in mind is keeping things factual, focusing on what our kid might be feeling, so like the emotional part, and then also safety. So adults, we might be worried about COVID and school transitions in a different way than what our kids might be worrying about. And sometimes our kids might bring up worries and we're like, what? Why are you even worried about that? But for them, they're experience their world in a different way than we are. And we're kind of their filter. So it's important to remember, like, even though that worry might seem ridiculous or doesn't make sense for us as adults, it's important for us to validate that for them as kids too. So let's say like you have your elementary age kid in the car and you're driving home from sports practice and your kiddo was like, hey, why were some kids at practice wearing masks and some kids not? Which I think is probably going to come up in school too, right? Like these questions are going to come up. Yeah. And so I think as parents, it might be easy for us to then focus on like how we feel about it or what our opinions are on why kids are wearing masks and kids aren't. Even though that might be helpful for us, our kids need to know the facts behind it and also for us to recognize what they're feeling. So saying something like, oh, that might be confusing that some people are wearing masks and some people aren't. And then normalizing sports practice, right? Like it's probably not safe to wear a mask when you're running around and playing where the coach can wear a mask because they're not running around and playing or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, and I think too, I get asked a lot, especially with the younger kids, like, well, do I ask them more or do I let them lead? And I think it's important to let our kids lead us. So if they keep asking questions, it's okay to answer. But then if you give them that response in the car and then they're like, oh, okay. And then they switch topics, it's okay to like let that go too. Because I think sometimes we worry like, oh, are we missing something if we don't keep asking?
Yeah.
And then also it's okay to say, I don't know. I think as parents, we're like, oh, we should probably know the answer, but because of everything going on, we might not know the answer. So it's okay to say, I don't know why that is. Like, maybe I can figure it out for you and let you know. Yeah. And then with our teens, I mean, that's another group, right? And another challenge of, I think it's most important to pay attention again to the emotions and keeping as factual as we can. And then also knowing that for our teens, a lot of it is around friendships and like social relationships. And so for them, it's really crucial. Like they might not see their friends all the time with what's going on at school. And I think a big thing that might be happening is, let's say your teen is in group A and then their best friend gets put in group B. So that means they're never going to overlap as far as like, at least during this time of hybrid. And so it might be, so it might be a common response for your teen to come to you and say, I'm not going to school. My best friend isn't in my group. I don't want to go to school. And we might be quick to say, well, no, you have to go to school. Because that's what, yes, you have to go to school. But I wonder if adding something in too of saying something like, oh, that must stink that, your best friend's not with you. I wonder if you're feeling sad about that. And then inviting that solution in together. Because I think when a teen comes to you and says something like that, what they're really asking is like, I'm feeling sad. I don't know what to do about this. Like, I don't know how to fix this. And so maybe offering a solution like, well, maybe you and your best friend can get together once a week and have like a virtual study date, or, let's make sure we call them once a week so you stay in touch, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's really what they're asking is, this really stinks and I don't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those would be two helpful ways to kind of with littles and then with our teens to kind of talk to them about what's going on.
Yeah, great information. Conversation is definitely a very powerful tool to use. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
can you tell us a little bit about, changes or red flags that parents and caregivers can keep an eye out for during these transitions?
Yeah. So this is going more into the atypical parts of transition. So
Mhm.
going back to like what we're noticing with typical, it would be that duration, intensity, and then the soothing time. So it would be looking like those increased outbursts or increased tantrums for our younger kids that they're inconsolable, right? Like
Mhm.
things that we're trying isn't helping. They're staying frustrated. They're staying worried. And then like changes into their routine too is important to pay attention to. So like suddenly not sleeping or not wanting to go to bed, or having a hard time waking up and not sleeping as much. And then like appetite changes, right? Like suddenly not really eating as much or eating a lot, which can be a stress response. Um, and then I think maybe more clinging or sadness could be a sign of like these transitions are really hard and they have bigger worries than maybe just what we'd like to see.
Mhm.
And then when they do talk about the worries, feeling like the worry isn't alleviated, like it doesn't feel better, they stay worried. And then that's when you might see the other behaviors.
Sure.
So those things are happening. Yeah, like that's when I would say like seeking out that additional support or like talking to another provider to kind of be like, hey, these things are happening and the stuff I'm doing at home doesn't seem to be working, like
Mhm.
getting that extra help. Yeah.
Yeah. I know we had talked about in the past a little bit about worry time.
Mm, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that would be?
Yeah. So I love the concept of having time at home as a family to be able to, I kind of coined it like worry time or
Yeah.
something like that. But just having the time to check in with your kids, and usually I encourage it to be on like an individual basis because they might not want to share their worries in front of their siblings. Um uh, and like maybe like before bed sitting down and be like, hey, like how was your day? And then asking, did anything come up that you feel worried about? And what's important is to set like a parameter of time around that. And the point of the time is so that there can be like a start time for worry and an end time for worry, and then a transition into something else, to kind of let them release that stuff and provide validation and support, and then also help them transition to like, okay, now we get to do this fun thing, or now we get to prepare for bed, or whatever it is. Because I think having that time frame, then too, kids expect to have that time, so then they're not thinking all day like, oh, I'm worrying and I don't know when I'm going to talk to mom and dad about it. And then also knowing that there's an end time, so like the worrying can stop at least for a little bit.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other strategies that parents might be able to just naturally implement in their day to help with some of those atypical behaviors if they're starting to see those?
Yeah, I think before implementing any strategies, I think it's important to try. I know that might be a challenge to do, but to try and be as predictable and consistent as possible.
Mhm.
And I think, the reason for that is our kids, again, we're our filter. We are our kids' filter into how they take in information. So as long as we can stay consistent and predictable, our kids kind of learn that. And so when things do change or things do happen, our kids are like, oh, okay, mom and dad have it, like I don't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
So as often as we can, keep bedtime predictable, keep the morning routine predictable, so that when things do come up, it's maybe not as an upset as maybe it would be if things are always like kind of upset, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other part, which I know as adults, we kind of hear this and we know, like the self-care thing, but I think that's so important to encourage our kids to be doing that too. So
Yeah.
having that quiet time to kind of decompress and de-stress from the day. There's this really great YouTube channel called Cosmic Kids, and
Yeah.
it's a yoga channel. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that
I
channel.
love it.
Yes, and it's so good for like our younger elementary age kids because there's usually a storyline with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit faster paced, which I think our younger kids like that versus a slower yoga video.
Mm-hmm.
So Cosmic Kids is a great one. And then it's called Go Noodle, and a lot of teachers use it. So it could be a resource that's used both at school and at home. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
And they have like different meditations on there and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
really,
then,
oh, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Oop.
I
I'm here.
I was just saying that with Cosmic Kids, we use that a lot in therapy for OT. And what I really like about Cosmic Kids Yoga is that you can find videos that are maybe 5 minutes long or 8
Yeah.
minutes long. So you can really, there's a wide population that you can use it with to fit that child's needs.
So it's not like super long and they lose
Yeah.
focus, or like super short where it's not helpful. Yeah. hmm
Yeah. Um, in regards to some of the sensory strategies and things that we use for or recommend for parents at home, when talking about transitions and changes, is the co-regulation term that we use. So really working with your child to come up with strategies that is going to help support their regulation and keeping also your regulation cool, so that you can help to really co-regulate together. So, things that we recommend doing, natural changes would be to, keep the environment calm by turning the lights down, or maybe listening to some calming music, weighted blankets to help with some of that deep pressure, or yoga, like Cosmic Kids Yoga. And then maybe some vestibular input with some gentle rocking and bouncing on a ball. So vestibular input is going to be any input that has a change in position, direction, or movement of the head. So working on more of the linear movements to help support that regulation.
hmm
Do you have any other um, uh, feedback on co-regulation on your end of things?
No, I love those ideas. And I think just any sort of like that mutual touch too, like I think is really helpful, especially for our younger kids, like the pressure of a hug, or just like sitting together on the couch, or, just having that comfort of quality time too can just really help. Even if you guys aren't saying anything, sometimes that's really helpful for kids and families to just like reconnect too, which can
Yeah.
be a de-stressor. Yeah. hmm
Great, thank you. So we had already talked a little bit about maybe when it's appropriate to seek out some additional supports, but maybe again, can you tell us when it might be appropriate to seek out some additional supports for your child?
Yeah, I think kind of what I've seen before of just paying attention, like if that duration, intensity, and soothe time just really goes up, and things that you're trying at home as a parent just don't seem to be helping, kind of, seeking out that additional support, but also paying attention to if there's multiple happening, because sometimes we're like, okay, sleep is hard, and sleep could be a reaction, right, to just transitioning back to school, and then things kind of even out. But if we're seeing like the sleep and then the tantrums and then the appetite, like all of that stuff starts to kind of coexist, those are times too where it's like, oh, okay, there must be something else going on that's really making things hard for kiddo, and maybe having additional support would be helpful.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
This information has just been so valuable for myself and hopefully for everybody watching. Are there any last comments or suggestions or information that you would like to say to those listening?
Yes. So I think the one thing I want to make sure to speak directly to parents about is about their own self-care. And so I know as parents it can be so easy, and adults in general, to just brush that aside and be like, oh, take care of others, like really focus on that, and kind of disregard what we need and our own needs. But really, self-care time is just about recharging our own batteries. And so if our battery is running low or on empty, and our kiddo has a big behavior or reaction, it's going to be 10 times harder for us to be present in that and help the kids, versus if we feel like we have like at least a half full battery,
Yeah.
we're going to be much more in control of ourselves to be able to help our kids. So I know it can be easy to not do that, but we all need that self-care and support just as much as our kids do. Um, and so like having that time, practicing that time, whatever it is to like reset yourself for the day, I think is really important to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then for those listening, what is the best way to reach out to you or others at Vanda Counseling?
Yeah. So our direct line at Vanda Counseling is 763 575 8086. Otherwise, we can be reached at our or at our website. And so that is www.vandacounseling, that's all one word, .com. And then if you want to reach me directly, my direct extension at Vanda is 128.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And then for those listening, if you guys have any further questions about speech or occupational therapy services, you can reach Sunny Days at our website, www.sunnydaystherapy.com, social media, or calling us at 952-223-2506. Thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us.
Thank
I have
you.
really loved being able to pick your brain on this subject. And I love all the bloopers in the videos too. So hopefully you guys enjoy,
Yeah, relatable.
enjoy watching us.
Yeah.
Um, so thank
Oh,
you for watching this webinar for those that are watching at home, and happy fall, everyone.
yes, thank you.